The admission by Wes Streeting today that the NHS reforms aren't going to start until at least April 2025, I mean, it's extraordinary. So even the support for the NHS is stuck in an NHS queue. It's clear that despite discussions of reform, the tangible improvements are within the NHS are evasive. This delay places the service in an uncomfortable stasis, with support itself stuck in what could be described as a terminal wait. We are in the waiting room, and we have a serious problem. The financial overspend of £387 million within the first quarter of this financial year alone underlines the gravity of the crisis. Inflation erodes any gains that increased funding might offer, leaving the NHS struggling struggling even to stand still. It has to run to stand still, as Hannah Rose Douglas of the Health Foundation has said. The burden is not simply financial. NHS buildings are crumbling, with nearly $14 billion needed for repairs, and crucially, staffing shortages exacerbate inefficiencies. A staggering 1 in 13 posts for nurses, midwives, health visitors remains vacant, and while training places are set to double, this will take years to produce tangible results. More concerning is the fact that despite increased staffing and funding since the pandemic, the NHS is treating roughly the same number of patients as in 2019, raising questions about productivity. Now, when people talk about NHS funding, they always talk about nurses, midwives, doctors, health visitors, technicians. They don't talk about the bureaucrats, the CEOs, the people managing these gigantic trusts. Why does nobody talk about them? Why are their jobs sacrosanct? Why are the people who manage this monolithic and cack-handed bureaucracy so ignored? Why does everybody tiptoe past them? And when I raise the issue about the inefficient bureaucracy and the inefficient bureaucrats, the inept and often ill-trained bureaucrats in the NHS, people in the comment section get really quite heated and tell me that I'm battering the same thing again, that I'm just on some sort of old hobby horse. But I find it extraordinary. It doesn't matter what I read. When people talk, when the government talks about the NHS, it only talks about the people we see. It doesn't talk about this hidden mass of individuals who are paper shuffling and making mistakes. I don't mind paying for paper shufflers if they get it right. But when I personally can see instances in my own personal experience of mistake after mistake after mistake in the paperwork, then I think the problem must be much bigger. And when I talk to other people and I say, do you have stories that are similar? And they say, yes. I find this very worrying, and nobody is talking about it. Streeting's proposed shift towards out-of-hospital care and illness prevention is fine. It's an idea floated by various ministers since 2006. There's nothing new in this. It's ambitious, it's rhetorical, it's a flourish, yet the trend has been in the opposite direction, with hospital expenditure rising and community care falling. We can no longer get to see a GP at the weekend. We are told, even when we fill out a form to say, I want to see a GP, ring 111 if you have any of these symptoms. Go to A&E if you have any of these symptoms. Don't trouble your hard-worked GP. And when we go to see the GP, we're faced with a person we've never met before who relies on bureaucracy, who relies on a printout on the computer to know our history. And that printout may be faulty. When I last went to see my doctor, there were things missing because it hasn't been updated in 6 to 8 weeks. I find this staggering. I find this casual approach to bureaucracy, utterly staggering. And unless we fix that, we cannot fix the NHS. Because the bureaucrats, and this is where I find it so frustrating, the bureaucrats are paid more than senior surgeons, GPs, doctors, nurses, consultants, midwives, health visitors. They are paid more. And proposals from think tanks for separate spending on prevention are they're gaining traction. Of course they are. But the Treasury remains hesitant because it's nothing new. The reality is that the service is beset by short-term needs that make long-term planning difficult, if not impossible, and by this blindness to where the real problem lies and where the real cuts could be made that would have serious impact. Trim some of that bureaucracy. Trim some of those bureaucrats. Get rid of some of those CEOs who are just sitting pretty and stuffing the money in their pockets. Do they have a medical background? If they don't, go! Thus, while the public is invited to contribute ideas for the NHS's future through a national conversation, the most pressing issue remains the injection of substantial funding coupled with a rethink of how resources are allocated, because any money you throw into the NHS will automatically go to the people who are already making a lot in the first place. The money going into the NHS needs to go to the people who are in the front line. The doctors, the nurses, the GPs. Until that point, both the parents and the staff, both the patients and the staff, will remain in limbo, waiting in a queue that seems endless, both metaphorically and literally. At least we're all going to have to wait until April to see what's going to happen anyway.